All right, so I was listening to a sermon this week, so I've always wanted to try this out because I never tell you guys to tell your neighbor anything. So I want you guys to turn to your neighbor and say, I prayed all week that you'd sit next to me. That went as good as I thought it was going to go. I'm excited about that. I'm super excited. I tell you, I guess those are my first words to every sermon is I'm super excited to be up here. And the message that I have for today called Yoked has been something that has been in my mind since the beginning of May, really. Every first weekend of May, me and Dub go to Colorado Springs, and we go to this. It's a prayer summit where you literally go and you worship with the Desperation Band. If you haven't heard them, you should be jealous. They're awesome. You go and you worship with the Desperation Band, and then you hear great speakers all over. And it's a way for us to refill our cup. And this year, we went to a thing. We went there for 2 days, and then we went to this program called Living Life by Design, which was also super exciting. And it was during this moment that I heard Yoked. I heard this passage talk about a yoke of slavery. And in Isaiah, God talks about breaking yokes. So it's really been on my mind. What is this yoke of slavery? What does it look like? How does it work? But before I get into that, before we start breaking down what it means to be yoked or what this yoke looks like, I want to talk to you about what God says about you first. Because if you understand what you look like in God's eyes, then you understand why Satan wants to yoke you. I'm going to say that one more time. If you know who you are, and you know who God says you are, and you live in that, then you know why Satan wants to trap you, why he wants to take you down. So I'm sure the Revolution students are tired of me telling them this, but I'm going to continue to tell them this, is you guys are great. That's how God sees you. You are the greatness of God. And oftentimes we like to disqualify ourselves. We went at this Living Life by Design. He kind of brought this thing to my mind. He says, how come it's wrong for us to call us what God calls us? Because think about it. If you go outside, if you leave this place today and you walk around thinking, I'm great, everybody's going to think you're conceited. Complete opposite. But the truth is, if God says that about you, why can't you? If you can't agree with God, what God says about you, then you can never live in it. You can never experience it. So, and you know, this is like I said a little bit ago, oftentimes we're the first ones to disqualify ourselves. We're the ones that say, no. There's times that that I've preached a sermon and you guys have come up to me, man, that was great. That was awesome. And I was like, well, you know, I kind of messed up here and all this other stuff. We've lived in a lifestyle to where we like to point out our own faults. God never points them out. He doesn't say, hey, you messed up here. He doesn't say, hey, you should have took this turn here. He says, hey, it turned out great because you're great. I'm the greatness inside of you, and I brought you to this point. That's how God sees us, is we are the greatness. In fact, I want you guys to see this in John 14. This is one of my favorite texts. Just because it reminds us just how powerful we are. And when Jesus was about to die on the cross, he's telling his disciples, he says, when I am raised to life again, you will know that I am in my Father. So Jesus is in God. My Father is in me. Wait, hold on, did I say that right? You will know that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. I am in you. Jesus was speaking directly to his disciples. The Spirit of Jesus is inside of us. Where is the Spirit of Jesus not great? Where is he not? He raised Jesus from the dead. In fact, it was through the Spirit that Jesus did all things. When he told the fig tree to wither, and it withered. When he cast out demons, it was through the Spirit that he did that. That Spirit of God, that one that he is in and he is in us. So we are great, and we have to know that we are great. But here's the thing. There is danger in knowing that. If you call yourself great and don't understand why you're great, then that's where we walk on the borderline of being conceited, right? We are not great because of who we are in God. Because what that does is that puts it on you. It's what you do. If I'm great because of who I am in God, then I'm saying I'm great because I praise God hard and I worship God hard and I do all this. I'm great because who God is in me. Think about that. That takes it completely off of who I am or what I've done and puts it all on what God did. We are great because of who Jesus Christ is in our life. That's why our story is so important. That's why your story changes people's lives, because it's the greatness of God reflected through you. This is one of the coolest things I've ever heard, and I put it on Facebook a long time ago, is when you show up, God shows off. That's the truth. When you show up in your greatness, when you show up in the person that God has made you to be, and realizing who God is in you, that's when God shows off. Because that's when the light of God is shown around to everybody around you. That's when everybody sees what's going on in your life and they're like, what is that? I want a piece of that. How do I get that? And then that's when everybody hears the story of Jesus or even sees it. It's through you, the greatness in you. Now, that being said, that's why Satan wants to yoke you. Because if he can take you out of that state of greatness that God has placed you in, then he can put us into a state of pain and anger and hatred and desperation and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden it looks like our world is foggy and we have nowhere to go. That's the place he has for us. We read this passage all the time, John 10:10. It says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I think we've read it so many times that we just think it's words. So when it actually happens, then we're just like, my world shook a little bit. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And we stop there. Later on, we're going to get to the second half of that. But this is Satan's plan for your life. Let's just lay it out there. Let's be real. Satan wants you to succeed in nothing except for hurting, except for suffering, except for being outcasted. The crazy thing about being outcasted is we're the only ones that outcast ourselves. God has always called us and he's always placed us here. You're not in Panhandle on coincidence. Nothing happens by coincidence. I don't believe in that. I believe everything happens by calling and election. You were placed here on purpose. You were in here on purpose. We go and we work where we work on purpose because we're the greatness in that place. And if it's a place where there's darkness all over the place, then you're the greatness that breaks the darkness up. That's what you are. That's who you are. Now I want to talk to you guys about the yoke. Let's get into the yoke. I don't really like it a whole lot because it's not a good thing. The yoke, if you know anything about a yoke, back in biblical times, this is what they would use. They would attach it to oxen to break up the ground so that they could harvest and plant and all this other stuff. The oxen were actually the only animals big enough to do this. So what would happen is when there would be a baby oxen, they would clamp these things around their neck so that they got used to it. And then as they would grow up, as they were used to that, that was all that they knew. So once they were putting the oxen or in the yoke, they would stay in the yoke, and they knew that they were about to go to work. And then by the time that they were fully grown, even in the big size that the oxen is, would do nothing but obey what the yoke said or where the yoke took it. You know what's crazy about that is, did you know the oxen was called the beast of burden? The beast of burden, because the only thing it knew was I'm going wherever I'm driven. I'm not going where I'm led. I'm going where I'm driven. This is how Satan works. Think about that. He knows if he can catch us at a young age that he's going to leave us trapped in the things that bound us. But here's another thing is, I think if we look in Genesis, we see another way he tries to yoke us. And this is from the very beginning of time. And as we read this, I want you to kind of see if you've seen this happen in your life. Because I know I've seen it in mine. Genesis 3, it says, the serpent was the shrewdest of all the animals the Lord had made. One day he asked the woman, did God really say to you that you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? Of course, we can eat from the fruit of the trees in the garden, the woman replied. It is only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we are not allowed to eat. God said, you must not eat it or even touch it. If you do, you will die. And then the serpent says, think about it, you won't die. Serpent replies, you won't die. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious. And she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some and she ate the fruit and ate it. Now I want you guys to look at this in a different perspective. Because Satan used fruit in this picture. And he used his cunning tongue to deceive Eve. He said, "Nay, come here. You know, you won't die. Eat this." She steps a little bit closer. She thinks about it. He's like, no. Eat it. Take a bite. Because you'll be more like God. Now think about the things that we get hooked on. Whether it's thoughts or addictions. You know, if it's an addiction, he's like, "Hey, try this one more time. It's not going to hurt you. I know you've gone 6 months without doing it. I know you've gone a year, 2 years. Come on, try it one more time." So you do it. And you're one step closer. And then he comes at you again. He says, "Hey, one more time." So you do it again. And the third time, that's when he snaps the yoke on your neck. And then you're driven by your addiction, or you're driven by your thoughts. And it's like, then you're carrying the burden. Then you're the beast of burden. It's crazy how he works. But it's his game plan. It's been his game plan since day one. Is he wants to yoke you. He wants to trap you to something that's not from God so that you can't walk in the things of God. If you're trapped to something that's not from God, it will destroy you. It will kill you and it will steal from you. That's what he wants for you. For you to work and be exhausted. I can't speak oxen, but I can't imagine any oxen after plowing a field was like, "Man, that was an amazing day. I'm going to go take a nap, get ready for tomorrow." I don't see that. In fact, I probably would have been the oxen that they would have had to whip because I'd have got tired like after the first round. That's me, but that's what a burden does to you. When you live outside, this is one of the coolest quotes that I've ever heard, is when you live outside of your purpose that God has for your life, you live in exhaustion. When you're not living in what God created you to be, you live in exhaustion. But when you walk in what God created you to do, you're inspired. Always inspired. You can't be inspired if you're yoked. You're driven into something that wasn't meant to be attached to your life, wasn't supposed to be a part of you. In fact, I want you guys to see this because this is the breaker, or the icing on the cake. I don't know why I said breaker. But James, I love James. I'm going to talk about James real quick. I was listening to a sermon, the same guy that I took the tell your neighbor that you prayed for them all week. I was listening to his sermon. He was telling a story about James. And do you guys know who James is? James was the half-brother of Jesus. Can you imagine how hard it would be to be James? Like, for real. This guy was telling this story. He said, you know how like sibling rivalry, like me and my little brother, if you'd have told my brother that he, would growing up, played baseball, Briar played baseball, people told him after I graduate, "You've got big shoes to fill." Briar hated that. I would have hated it because I want to establish my own shoes. I don't want to walk in that, right? So he was telling this story. He said, with James and Jesus, there would be none of that. And he tells this story of Mary, asking James, "James, how was your day?" As he comes home from school. And he's like, "It was good. I got a couple A's." And then Jesus walks in and said, "Jesus, how was your day?" "Oh, it's good. I saved everybody's life." That's James. James had big shoes to fill. Can you imagine going to a party after that? Jesus changed water into wine. I'd have left. I'm just being real. But in all seriousness, let's get back to the text. This is what James has to say. It says, "And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, 'God is tempting me.'" How many times have we pointed the finger and say, "God, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? Why can't it happen to somebody else? I tithe. I go to church on Wednesdays and Sundays. Why is this happening to me?" He says, God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. This is one of the most freeing statements that I've ever heard. The only thing that can take captive over your life is that which you let yoke you. That puts it all on us. Because here's the thing about it is God has equipped us to be great. It's like Chris said, you don't have to learn anything new. He's a part of you. I am in my Father, He is in me, and I am in you. The only thing that can take over my life and yoke me is that which I allow to yoke me. Which means that as I continue to walk in the great things that God has for me and the greatness that He's placed on me, I continue to walk in freedom. That's our God. Our God is a God of freedom. That's why we don't follow the Old Testament rules anymore. The rules were made to abolish it, made to destroy sin, but it actually created it because they were trying so hard to follow all these rules. Jesus came and established a new covenant that if you believe in me, your sins are forgiven. You live eternally in heaven with God. It was a covenant of freedom. So we should be able to live a life of freedom because here's the truth, is that God conquered all things. Nothing has stood up to God. Nothing has overcome God. God has conquered all things, and Paul says that we're even more than conquerors. So my question to you, church, is what can conquer us? If Christ is inside of us, what can conquer us? Only that which we allow to. Only that which we are allowed to. That's why he told Peter, greater things will you do than I. Because we are capable of praying and laying hands on people and seeing them healed. Because of who he is in us. We are capable of conquering the sickness that is in somebody. We are capable of conquering our circumstances. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter where you are. Satan's plan is to yoke you, to trap you. God's plan is to release you, to break chains. The other half of John 10:10 says, this is Jesus. Oh, all right, there we go. All right, I've come that they may have life and have life to the full. I have come that they may have life and life to the full. Here's the thing, is that's a promise. And I've heard that's a promise for you, that's a promise for you, that's a promise for you so many times that I think we can get into this state where we convince ourselves, well, that's awesome. I can't wait till that happens. Here's the thing is promises in the Bible are meant to be experiences now. If God promises something, you were made to experience it. If God promised you freedom, you were made to walk in freedom. It's an experience. How do we grow in God? We experience God. This is an experience for Him, from Him, for us. This is how we walk in that freedom. This is how we break that yoke. We saw Satan wants to trap us, to kill, steal, and destroy. And how does he do it? Through our own desires. But Jesus said himself, words from his mouth, red letter text, I came to give you life and life to the full. This means that when you walk out your morning every day, you should experience life and life to the full because of the greatness inside of you. This means that we don't have to fear what's going to happen in our day just because we wake up in our car as a flat tire. Bad things may start off, but here's the thing is I can conquer bad things. It may continue to snowball, but I can conquer it. We have two roles. Can I tell you, just to be honest, thanks, Mike. You're always the water guy. I love it. Yeah. All right, we're good. We have two choices when bad things happen. We have two roles. We can either play the victim and, the world stinks. It's coming against me. The world's squeezing in. Or we can be responsible for an outcome. We can either play the victim and be yoked by our thoughts, or we can be responsible and overcome it and conquer it through our King. That's what we're made to go through. And then, I was thinking about it because, Jesus talked about conquering yokes, or in Isaiah, God mentioned that I'm going to break every yoke. And then Paul mentions, and I'm going to read this text later in the afternoon, I guess later in the service, not in the afternoon, because that makes a long service. We're going to read it later in the service, but this is what Jesus says about the yoke. It says, Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and let me teach you. because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my burden is light. Here's the thing. We talked about the yoke that Satan uses, that yoke of slavery, and it's an attachment to something that's not from God. Jesus' offering is for rest and peace and attachment to him. When we're yoked to Jesus, we can overcome everything. He's our king. He's our provider. In fact, he walked out the path so we could follow it. He's our light. That's how we overcome things. It's time for us to stand up and say, listen, I'm tired of feeling like the world's coming against me, because I can overcome that because of the greatness inside of me. Every morning, you should tell yourself you're great. The more you hear something, did you know, I firmly believe this, the more you hear something, the more you're going to convince yourself that it's true. If you continue to make fat jokes around me, I'm going to go to the gym more often because I'm going to believe you. That's just how it is. So if I tell you that you're great all the time and you tell you that you're great all the time, you're going to start to believe you're great because you keep hearing it over and over and over again. That should be the first thought in our mind every day. I'm great because of who God is in me. I'm great and I can overcome my circumstances. I'm great and I can cast out sickness. I'm great and I can speak a word of life over somebody and change their circumstances. You see, the greatness inside of you wasn't necessarily just for you. It was made for everybody you come in contact with. That's how Jesus did it. He used his greatness and impacted the world. Not impacted himself. He impacted the world. And then he showed 12 other people how to be great. And then they went out and impacted the world. That's what the church is all about. Spreading greatness throughout this place. As I was preparing for this message, I kind of got this image of broken shackles all around the church. Because that's what the church should look like. Broken shackles. Breaking everything that tries to take a hold of our life. But then I think about how the time tells us that we have to live. It tells us that, for men, we got to be strong. We can't show weakness. We have to, we got to be tough, right? I can't be weak. I don't want nobody to see me as weak. Then I'm a pushover. And then I think about how Jesus was, and Jesus was just real. He was real with everybody. I don't think chains get broken when we paint on a mask. We can come here every Wednesday and paint on or every Sunday, I guess is what today is, and paint on a happy face and come in here and pretend everything's okay, even if it's tough. We can come in here and pretend like everything's going great. But I think it's in the realness of who we are that we experience God more. When you can come and be real, that's why we talk about getting on our hands and knees and praying to God. Because when you're on your hands and your knees, you can't be fake. Submission to God is not a fake thing. That's why we do the prayer at the end of services where we have our Relate Life pastors come up and our elders. Because this is a place for chains to be broken. This is a place for people to come in who don't know Jesus and realize, hey, you have greatness inside of you because of who God is. For people who never really had a father figure to come in and say, and we can tell them, listen, you do have a father who created you and actually breathed life into your life. And then that shackle of abandonment is gone. That's what the church is. That's why Mark talked about recharge and why it's one of our red rules is because this is a place of breaking yokes. This is a place where we walk in freedom and we don't have to be afraid of it. This should be a place that we come and we're real with each other. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It's between me and God. And here's the thing is we're not alone. I don't know what you're struggling with. If you are struggling with things, Satan's biggest lie to you is that you're doing it by yourself. You're not alone. We don't have to be alone. When we act tough and we try to put that face on, we isolate ourselves with our own struggle. God was never alone in the beginning. God was never alone. He had the Son and the Holy Spirit with him. If our God was never alone, why should we be? Why should we be? If we're struggling, I want to find the closest person to me that can help me. I want to break my yoke. And that's God's message for you today. Is it's time for us to quit painting faces. It's over. That time is done and behind us. But it's time for us to be real with each other. Because when we grow with each other, then we'll feel God's presence even greater than we already do now. And we'll see shackles being broke. And we can just toss them outside and say, that was part of our past. Whatever, it's gone. I'm walking in the greatness that God has for me now. You know, I'm going to close with this. But you know what I think God's yoke looks like? You know, we say Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. In fact, Jesus said that I'm the Alpha and the Omega in Revelations. You know what I think God's yoke looks like? Have you ever seen an Omega sign? Will you bring up that Omega sign? That's what I think God's yoke looks like. When I'm hurt, or when I know somebody's hurting, what's our natural instinct? To put our arm around them. That's our instinct. There's no headlock, no chokehold. It's not driving me anywhere. When my arm's around somebody, I can just walk with them wherever they're going. I can live life with them and move forward. That's what I think Jesus' yoke looks like. And this is, the reality of the truth is we're going to close out in a time of worship because God has given me 3 words to close out with. And it's freedom is contagious. As you walk in the freedom that God has placed in your life, then you'll release freedom in other people's. You can't give people what you don't have. But you have freedom. You have freedom through our King.